Gentlemen, welcome back to the Conflict Zone, your go-to source for insightful discussions on international affairs, law, and security. I'm your host, Dr. Christian Barrientos Ichaso, and today we have a truly exceptional episode lined up for you. We're diving deep into the heart of the matter, exploring the unfolding events in Ukraine and shedding light on the expertise of a distinguished journalist who has covered such critical international conflicts. Our featured guest needs no introduction to those who closely follow military and intelligence matters. With an impressive career spanning numerous renowned media outlets, Martin Arostegui stands as a beacon of experience and knowledge in his field. Martin Arostegui's remarkable career. Martin Arostegui is not just a journalist, but a seasoned war correspondent who has ventured into the heart of conflict zones to bring us the stories that shape our understanding of global events. He's been a voice for the voiceless, reporting on the complexities and nuances of international conflicts that mirror the current situation unfolding in Ukraine. Arostegui's byline has graced the pages of reputable publications such as Voice of America, The Wall Street Journal, The Daily Telegraph, The Washington Times, CNN, FOX News, UPI, and France 24. His reporting has provided invaluable insights into the world of military operations, intelligence strategies, and geopolitical dynamics. Twilight Warriors, exploring military special operations. But Martin Arostegui's influence doesn't end with his reporting. He is also an accomplished author, having penned the enlightening book Twilight Warriors. This book delves into the world of military special operations, shining a light on the brave men and women who undertake covert missions to ensure our security.
Hello, everyone. We talk in this podcast with Martin Arostegui. The Conflict Zone is your podcast. Subscribe and share everything about the international security business with Martin Arostegui. Hi, Martin. How are you?
Hi, Christian. How are you? The recording you just heard was of what was happening in Odessa, in Ukraine. That the very night that Hezbollah and Hamas were attacking Israel. While they were attacking Israel with Russian-made Katyusha rockets and possibly other types of missiles, Russia was attacking Ukraine with Iranian-made Shahed drones. And since Iran is behind Hezbollah and Hamas, complex interconnections which are developing and between Russia and Iran and the way that they're both pursuing their military and diplomatic objectives, political objectives, in a joint way, in a joint fashion, at an international level now. Because it's obvious that, to me, and a lot of other analysts that I've spoken to indicate that it wasn't only Iran which was behind the attacks on the savage terrorist onslaught by Hamas on Israel last week. Indicative, the timing of certain diplomatic moves by Russia coordinated with those of Iran to take advantage of the terrorist, of the terror created by the Hamas and attack on Israel at a regional level. While they were using, basically, the conclusion that a lot of people are coming to, that I'm coming to, and that some other analysts are coming to, is that Iran and Russia are using now the Palestinian and terrifying other Arab governments into following their line on rejecting any further détente with Israel, which is what the U.S. has been pushing, and seem to be making some considerable lot of progress in the sense of normalizing relations between Israel Saudi Arabia, and some other key Arab countries, Muslim countries. They are using the Hamas and this renewed terrorist onslaught against Israel to put all these Arab nations in a very uncomfortable situation, because they must either back the demands for an independent Palestinian state being pursued by Hamas in their highly violent, savagely violent way, or they risk being targets themselves, sponsored by Iran and Russia. Well, sponsored by Iran, behind which is Russia. And Russia is coordinating this as well with this war in Ukraine in ways that I will explain a bit later. So it was very clear that hours after Hamas launched its terrorist attack on Israel, in which, to repeat, I think everybody knows what happened. It was horrific. It was monstrous. Nothing had ever like this been seen before. The genocidal wars in Africa, something like that, women being raped massively in front of their families, babies being decapitated, people being executed with heavy high caliber machine guns at point blank range. I mean, this kind of thing. Really, really monstrous type violence that until now I don't think we've seen anywhere except maybe in Rwanda, that kind of thing. Right? Genocidal violence. At the same time this is going on, the leader of the head of state of Iran, Ali Khamenei, launched a very clear warning to Arab states that those who pursued normalizing relations with Israel were going to lose. And at the same time that he praised Hamas for their attacks on Israel. At the same, and of course, his foreign minister made a tour we went on a public broadcasting tour, blitz throughout the Middle East and throughout the Muslim world, calling upon all other Muslim governments to back the Hamas terrorism. Essentially, that's what they were asking them to do. It's curious, though, at the very same time, in Moscow, Vladimir Putin was receiving the prime minister of Iraq, a very key country in all this, because Iraq is still has American military involvement there. There's still American troops there. It still maintains very close, although even rather complicated relations with the U.S. The U.S. has military installations there. It has military advisors operating in Iraq. Yet at the same time, an Iranian-backed party is gaining influence in Iraq, and it also has backs its own militias, which control part of the country, or are basically active have exercise political control over part of Iraq. So, I think in a very clear signal, Vladimir Putin received the prime minister of Iraq. His name, I believe, is Soudani, that's his second name, in Moscow, and appeared with him at a press conference in front of the cameras, said that American policy in the Middle East had failed, and that it was time for Arab states to get serious about backing a joint Palestinian state in what is now Israel. I mean, we all know what a joint Palestinian state would mean. It would mean an independent Palestinian state. It would mean unifying Gaza with the West Bank, which is currently ruled by much more moderate government, and basically destroying the state of Israel. I mean, there'd be virtually nothing left. Israel would be left at half a state, with most of its territory controlled and most of the people in it controlled by a terrorist regime. That's essentially what would happen. So it's very clear from the diplomatic movements that surrounded this terrorist attack that Russia and Iran were clearly behind it, were expecting it, had knowledge that it was going to happen, and timed their own diplomatic initiatives to impose their agenda on the Arab and Muslim world. Use this through terrorism, through terrorism. So that's what we have. I mean, it's Russia, of course, has a lot of interest in destabilizing the Middle East, as well as the Balkans. They're also active in the Balkans. They're just Serbia is on the verge of attacking Kosovo again. They're massing troops on the border of Kosovo, which is a NATO-protected territory that broke away from Serbia in the Balkan Wars back in the 1990s. So that's obviously being inspired by Russia, because Russia is a close Serbia is a close ally of Russia. It's virtually a satellite of Russia. It's the only country in southwestern Europe which doesn't want to join the EU or NATO. It's the last satellite that Russia has left. One of the last few Russia has left in Eastern Europe. And at the same time, he's destabilizing and joining up with Iran to destabilize the Middle East. It's amazing to me that, I think there are reasons for this. And another thing that I think I've got to mention, there are a lot of reasons why it'd be very beneficial for Russia right now to draw attention towards the Middle East, to detract from what is happening in Ukraine. In other words, at a moment when they may be launching a new offensive in Ukraine, or the winter is coming and they may be preparing a massive missile onslaught on Ukrainian cities, the emphasis will be, all world attention will be on what is happening in Gaza, in Israel, where, of course, Israel is going to launch a massive military operation to retake Gaza. Basically, they're going to wipe out. They want to exterminate Hamas. It's probably something that's going to be. It's going to be an extremely bloody urban combat, which may last for months and could escalate, and could in fact develop into different fronts if Hezbollah begins attacking Israel from the north, Syria, and possibly terrorist cells in the West Bank around Jerusalem begin activating terrorist attacks there. I'm sure Hamas has that area infiltrated. So that's probably what is going to happen to Israel. Maybe Israel may control it. They have very effective security services. They're going to have a lot of aid, obviously, from the United States. I really don't think anybody else. I don't think the Europeans are going to be. They send an aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean, thinking of sending two. But so, I mean, they're certainly going to have support to do whatever they need to do. Although the State Department is wishy-washy, they're already saying, well, Israel should make sure to avoid civilian casualties, which is fine. I think that's absolutely has to be the case. Israel cannot appear itself to seem like a terrorist state. But I mean, it's already at the top of the agenda. It's how this is used to control and curtail the operations that Israel must undertake to inhibit operations, anti-terrorist operations, anti-insurgent operations that Israel is going to be forced to undertake has yet to be seen. We'll see how the State Department uses it. They've been acting in a rather strange way. I mean, they refuse to acknowledge Iran's involvement in the attack. Although the State Department has said, look it up, Hamas, was trained, funded, assisted, supplied by Iran. They refuse to say that Iran had any direct hand in the latest Hamas terrorist attacks in Israel. They won't say it. Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, says that there's no smoking gun. Biden, in his speech on Tuesday, it was a very good speech in a lot of ways, that, condemning the attacks, giving Israel, saying that the U.S. would give all the support that Israel required, He didn't mention Iran once. And it is becoming, there are suspicions, suspicions which have been made public by members of Congress, that the reason for the Biden administration's reticence to mention Iran in connection with the Hamas terrorist onslaughts is because there are Iranian sympathizers in the Biden administration. In fact, the FBI is investigating one of the chief negotiators in the with Iran, one of the chief negotiators in the talks with Iran, which presumably would be aimed towards relaxing sanctions in return for Iranian concessions, like releasing some of the American detainees in Iran recently for $6 million that were frozen in South Korea, and so on. One of the chief negotiators in these talks is being investigated by the FBI for possible espionage. This is a fact. This is a fact. And that he's in fact, he's not alone. I mean, he operates a network of Iranian, shall we say, officials that are, well, shall we say, sympathetic or that favor a policy of appeasement towards Iraq, who are very prominent in the Biden administration. And this has been, this accusation, this allegation has been made by members of the U.S. Congress. And in fact, Representative Michael Waltz of Florida has called for a congressional investigation into this. A congressional investigation. I mean, it is difficult for me to understand, to see how this operation of massive proportions that Hamas launched against Israel could have possibly been done without very extensive and very professional military advice, which it would only get from Iran and maybe Russia. Maybe Russia had a more direct role than we might even think. I mean, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which of course was basically the motor behind Hamas. They're the ones who began Hamas. They're the ones who trained the military wing, the Al-Qasim brigades, supplied them, funded them, has been operating with the Russian military now for years in Syria. They've been operating very closely. This has, aside from backing, allowing the survival of the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, this has also served to secure arms routes between Syria and Lebanon for Hezbollah, and also perhaps by sea into the Gaza Strip and to Hamas. The volume of arms being moved through that route is massive, Christian. We're talking about 250,000 Russian Katyusha rockets, okay? This is the volume of the arms supplies going to Hezbollah, and some of which are undoubtedly ending up with Hamas as well, which come from Russia, Syria, and by land into Lebanon and Beirut. So obviously there's a military infrastructure there in support of these terrorist organizations, which led to the Hamas attacks on Israel on last weekend. And I think will also supply operations by Hezbollah and maybe other groups that already may open new fronts around Israel when the Israeli army becomes completely but urban warfare is very complicated.
Can you repeat? The sound is no good. Can you repeat what you say last 1 second, 2 seconds again?
I began, I had explained the extent of the Russian Iranian military infrastructure, which operates in the Middle East to supply Hamas and Hezbollah. Right. That's what I had. That's what I had said. And then I went on to say that, which is what I said at the beginning of the broadcast. You know, when the Israeli army becomes completely tied down in Gaza to extricate Hamas and hopefully rescue some of the 150 Israeli and other foreign hostages that there are in that Hamas brought there from Israel. You're talking about, I think they're talking about 22 Americans, something like that, among them. Or maybe I confused that with the amount of Americans killed in Israel. I'm not sure, but there are American hostages, and I imagine European hostages as well, in being held by Hamas in Gaza right now. Among total, it's about 150. And you know, there are highly trained anti-terrorist teams which are planning, you know, drawing up plans to rescue them, try to locate them as part of this that Israel is going to launch. But it's going to be a very bloody operation. Israel expects to use about maybe 300,000 troops in this. That's a big chunk of its army. That's about at least a third, no, about half of its army. And on top of that, it's going to have to deal with, obviously, the plan is that Hezbollah and other groups are going to start terrorist attacks elsewhere, possibly within Israel and in the periphery and in the northern, in the frontier with Lebanon and the frontier with Syria. So Israel is going to be in a very, very tough military position. It'll have to be relying to a very large extent on U.S. aid, which has about maybe 1,000 smart bombs, this kind of thing. There are obviously members of SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force possibly already in Israel, ready to launch joint hostage rescue missions, certainly with the Israelis. But you know, again, I mean, if you've got an administration that is being influenced by Iran, that has people there that don't want to avoid at all costs any kind of direct confrontation with Iran, to what extent are they prepared to compromise American support to Israel and American military operations in that theater in order to appease Iran? We don't know. So this is the situation. I also would mention that it's also emerged. I think this is yet to be confirmed, Christian, but I wouldn't be at all surprised that the Taliban are developing weapons routes to support Hamas. They say they want to send fighters to fight against Israel now. Of course, the Taliban have a problem with the Israelis. I mean, with the Iranians, rather. They don't get along. However, so, you know, my enemy's enemy is my friend. You know, maybe in the view of the situation now, this may lead to some sort of détente between Iran and Afghanistan, so the Taliban government and the Iranians can jointly give military assistance to Hezbollah and can jointly fight Israel. Just put it that way. Broadcast the time that the U.S. retreated from Afghanistan, that the $80 billion in U.S. military equipment that was left behind there was going to eventually end up in the hands of terrorist organizations. Well, this is about to happen. If the Taliban do develop routes, support arms routes into the Israel theater now, into Lebanon and possibly to Gaza, that will be those be the weapons they will be using. The massive amount of American weapons left behind in Afghanistan. I mean, you're talking about not just M16s and heavy machine guns, and you're talking about very communications equipment, eavesdropping equipment, night vision. The latest type of night vision thermal equipment, this kind of thing.
You predict
they can get AK-47s, anywhere, but this stuff is very, very difficult to get. and they're going to have it. Iran has it, Afghanistan has it, and they can supply it in large quantities to Hezbollah and Hamas.
And Hamas does. You predict.
This is it's not, it's certainly it's not good, put it that way.
You write by the Diario Las Americas.
Yes, I had a very long article going into particularly the Iranian-Russian involvement.
Yeah, but you talk about the Abraham's treaty, Trump's treaty. Yeah. Abraham, what do you think about this treaty, international treaty?
Well, that is the target of this Russian-Iranian offensive, diplomatic offensive right now. I would call it terrorist diplomacy. That's what it is. Terrorist diplomacy. Yeah, that's what it is. In the 19th century, we had gunboat diplomacy. Now we have terrorist diplomacy.
The terrorist diplomacy. Oh, stop.
Of making the process of normalizing relations with Israel, recognizing Israel's right to exist and all that, and recognizing the current status quo within Israel, which is the self-governing Palestinian states of the West Bank and Gaza, I think you call it, insofar as you can call it anything at this stage because it's a terrorist enclave. They are destroying that. I mean, they are virtually telling the Arab countries, either you do this or this terrorism is going to expand and it could happen to you. Because they can pull off a terrorist attack, a major terrorist at any time. Bear that in mind. I mean, you might very frightening memories of an incident that's rarely mentioned nowadays, but I remember it very well because I was analyzing terrorism back in Washington, D.C. with Griffin International at the time. Back in 1979, there were Islamic terrorists infiltrated among pilgrims attending the annual Hajj in Mecca, launched a massive terrorist takeover of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. Okay? They took it held with close advice from the counter-terrorist unit GIGN had to do it because if they brought in Americans or Brits, everybody would have gone crazy. It took them weeks and thousands of casualties to regain control of the mosque. The Saudi monarchy almost tumbled. It almost collapsed. But finally, with the use of paralyzing gas, they were able to penetrate the tunnels where the hostages were being kept by the Islamic terrorists, and following some Mahdi of some sort. I think it was probably an Iranian-sponsored operation. I don't think the Saudis ever wanted to admit it for their reasons. But it's very curious that this happened the very year that the Islamic revolutionary regime came to power in Iran. That very same year, the year after, when they overthrew the Shah and the Ayatollah Khomeini took over. Within months, they were trying to, they were launching an attack on Saudi Arabia. So, this happened before, and it came very close to toppling the Saudi monarchy. So I imagine they can do that. Not imagine. I mean, I know that they have the I'm sure they have the infrastructure, the bases to do that in many Arab countries at any moment that they should so choose. And this is what they're facing. And I think, obviously, what they did in Israel was a warning that either they get on the side of the terrorists or the terrorists are going to attack them. Essentially, that was what.
Yes.
And indeed, in fact, not only did the Prime Minister of Iraq go to Moscow, but the King of Jordan, in the last few days, made a speech in front of the parliament in his full military uniform, King Abdullah, calling for absolutely, irrevocably, an independent Palestinian state in Israel. I mean, to what extent he backs his words with actions, we don't know. Jordan is exactly a very rich country. But it's obvious that, support the current Israeli status quo, it would be very, very difficult for them. And I think any rapprochement with Saudi Arabia might well be at least frozen for the moment.
Thank you, Martin. That's one conclusion. Yeah, we have one conclusion. Your conclusion in this podcast.
Well, I think I've already outlined my main points, Christian. I mean, I think again the conclusion is that the Hamas attack on Israel was much more than what surprisingly the State Department is putting it out to be, which was there's a bunch of terrorists deciding to have a good time getting rowdy on a Saturday night. It was a very concerted, very highly planned, very rehearsed operation backed by Russia, by Iran and Russia, and coordinated with their political diplomatic efforts to wrest control of the Middle East from the United States. That's what it was.
Thank you. Subscribe and share this important podcast in the conflict zone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Martin. See you next podcast.
See you later. Bye-bye. See you in the podcast.
Analyzing the situation in Ukraine. Today, we're fortunate to have Martin Arostegui with us, providing his expertise on the developing situation in Ukraine. As tensions rise and international concerns mount, Arostegui's insights will offer a deeper understanding of the complexities at play and the potential implications for global stability. A message from Dr. Christian Barrientos Ichaso. Before we kick off our conversation, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude to our audience. Your support, subscriptions, and engagement keep our mission alive to foster awareness and understanding of critical international matters. As an international company and business lawyer, I am deeply committed to sharing insights on international law, security, compliance, anti-corruption measures, tackling crime, and facilitating smooth trade relations. Stay connected. So whether you're an avid follower of international affairs, a business professional navigating the complexities of global trade, or someone seeking clarity amidst the chaos of international conflicts, podcast The Conflict Zone is your destination for accurate information and informed discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, grab your notepads, ready your questions, and get ready for an illuminating conversation with the one and only Martin Arostegui. Stay tuned because you won't want to miss a single moment of this episode. Thank you for joining us, and let's dive right into the heart of the matter.